Join us at Denver Community Media every fall for Harvest Your Creativity, a month-long celebration where we offer free, hands-on media workshops and events designed to help you learn new skills, meet other creatives, and just hit record.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending today's workshop on storytelling. I'm calling it the 4 C's of storytelling. You might have seen it advertised as the 3 C's of storytelling, but it's actually the 4 C's. I'm Rico Lazo, a public speaking and storytelling coach, and it's my privilege to be here at Denver Community Media, putting on this workshop for people here in attendance, as well as those watching online, either live or later. So if there are any technical glitches, it's only because this is a hybrid event. We love to do things to the best that we can, and so thank you for your patience. Let's go ahead and get into it. Well, actually, let me introduce myself better. So I am Rico Lazo. I bill myself as a public speaking and storytelling coach, and I love storytelling, and that's why I've decided to do this workshop for everyone today. And my job today is to really impress upon you how impactful and powerful storytelling truly is. So you might be thinking, what is storytelling, right? I mean, you hear this word, it's kind of commonly thrown around, but like, what is it? It's not some mythological creature. It's something that we do every day with your friends, your family, your partner, your colleagues, whomever. People ask you, how was your day? You're giving them a story. You're listening to the gossip, what's going on in the world. That's a story. So the idea is learning how to tell stories is just a way to communicate better. And so you might be thinking, why am I here? What's in it for me? Well, I want to say that storytelling provides many, many benefits. Many, many benefits. I'm going to highlight 3 though. 1, it can increase your confidence. And who doesn't want more confidence, especially in your communication skills? It can also make you more persuasive as a speaker. So when you're negotiating that salary increase with your boss, might be a good time to tell a really great story about your performance. Or maybe you're interviewing for a job and they tell you, tell me about a time when. That's the cue, tell a story. Or in any fashion, right? You can be persuasive. But the number 1 reason that I love storytelling is, without a doubt, the ability to connect deeply with people. In fact, I had the great privilege of attending a workshop given by Craig Valentine, a world champion speaker from Toastmasters, the 1999 world champion of public speaking. And in his storytelling workshop, he shared these amazing stories. But what landed with me the most was this notion that if you become a master storyteller, you can connect with any audience. And so when he said that, I was all ears. That was like the secret formula to how to connect. And so that's what really led me to becoming a storytelling coach. And again, just to highlight why storytelling is so important, it's that for us humans, we humans are storytelling animals. We're the only animal in the animal kingdom that actually tells stories. We communicate through stories. And since the beginning of time, as long as we've been talking as people, we have been sharing stories. And so it's our superpower. Animals have their superpowers and their abilities and talents. The eagle has its beak, its ability to fly, its talons, its vision. The chameleon can change colors. The octopus has many, many different talents, whether it's fitting into tight spaces. Have you seen how an octopus can literally escape out of a jar that's been screwed tight? If you haven't seen that, check it out on YouTube. It can spray ink. But again, our ability as humans is to connect through stories. So I want to demonstrate just what storytelling is. This is oral storytelling. So if you came thinking this is written fiction storytelling, sorry to disappoint you. But we're going to be telling personal, true stories, stories that happen to, well, I'm telling stories that happen to me, and you're going to be working on telling stories that happen to you. There's nothing more powerful than telling a story that's happened to you. And the reason why is that nobody else can tell it. Only you can tell your own stories. And so when you're vulnerable and you share a story that's powerful, it really lands with the audience. So let me go into my first story in today's session. I'm sitting in my second grade classroom. We're playing bingo, and I am looking at my chart, or my whatever it's called, the tablet of letters. And the teacher, Miss Pasquin, is yelling or calling out, B. I'm looking down, I have a B, but I don't want to cover it. N, same thing. Frankie, sitting next to me, says, Rico, what's up, man? Why are you not covering up the letters? I don't know, man. I'm doing the best I can here. I, still feigning like I don't know what I'm doing. Who doesn't know how to play bingo? Finally, G, O, I have bingo, but I'm not covering up my tiles. Frankie, he's about to lose his mind. He says, Miss, Rico has bingo. And she looks at me surprised, like, why haven't I called out bingo? Rico, do you have bingo? And all I can manage is a head nod. So she said, well, come on up, claim your prize. So I get my paper, take it up to her desk. She checks it. Here's your prize. I head back to my desk. I didn't want to call out bingo because I was so shy. I was extremely shy. I was an extreme introvert. I had probably what you would call social anxiety as a 7-year-old. And this moment in time is etched to my mind because it was the first moment that I realized that I was shy and introverted. And I shared this story with all of you today because I want to demonstrate that anybody can become a better storyteller. That if a shy, introverted guy can go on to become a public speaking coach and a storytelling coach, then anybody who's never shared a story publicly can certainly craft and tell a story. And that's what we're here to do today. So as I mentioned, today's workshop is called the 4 C's of story telling. Initially, it was going to be called the 3 C's, but in going through the content, I realized that it was better to break it up into these 4 steps, into the smallest pieces so that you can remember this. And I'm calling it the 4 C's to make it easy for you to remember these steps. So we have story collecting, story choosing, story crafting, and story conveying. Just to make it easy, the 4 C's. And for anybody who wants a presentation, I'll gladly share it with you and we'll work with you. So if those viewing online can chat in, or those who are watching later can comment and it'll be sent to you. So our first C of storytelling is story idea collecting. The number one thing I hear from people is, but Rico, I don't have any stories. Nonsense. We all have stories. We're the storytelling animals. It's our superpower. The problem for many people is they've not taken the time to actually collect the stories. So I want to use this metaphor of mining for gems so that you can understand and visually see this process. So the idea of story idea collecting is going into our memories and trying to identify those stories, those story ideas. We're mining for those stories. We're going to be excavating those long forgotten stories. And we're going to do this through an activity that I'll share with you here momentarily. But just understand there are many ways to remember your stories, your memories, the experiences that had an impact on you. The first one I want to discuss is called Homework for Life. This comes from an incredible book called Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. And he suggests writing down the most memorable experience from your day. At the end of each day, the beginning of each day, whenever you have time, you're basically writing down these story ideas. The idea is to build up a story bank, a story vault, a story arsenal. You can use whatever moniker you want. This is how you're going to build up your collection. It's hard to pull a story out of thin air, so you want to build up your stories. So Homework for Life is great if you're a writer or you like to journal. because you can just incorporate this into your daily practice. He calls it homework for life because he's a teacher. And through doing this over a number of years, he's built up a story bank of hundreds of stories. So it's just about making it a conscious effort. But I get it. I write for 30 minutes every day. This has become a part of my life, but I'm a storytelling coach. If you're not wanting to dedicate that much time doing it daily, I understand. So we're going to do an activity together that's called First Best, Last Worst. This is an activity that's going to allow you to capture those story ideas. Okay, and so this comes from the book Storyworthy as Well by Catherine Burns of the Moth fame. So what you'll see is a chart with words going down the column, 1 to 15, and then first, last, best, worst signifies your first recollection or memory or experience, the last experience, the best experience, and then the worst experience. The idea is to just take a few minutes to jot down whatever comes to mind first. It's not about being perfect. You don't even need to fill in every cell of this table. But the idea is by quickly writing down the first thing that comes to mind, we're jogging our memories. We're collecting those stories. We're excavating, we're mining for those gems. That's what we're doing. So just take a few moments to write down, what was your first job? Was it in high school? Was it in college? Was it after college? Was it earlier? Were you enterprising? I grew up with a buddy who had a paper route as a kid, and he always had all the money. He could buy a home gym. He could buy all the video games because he had a paper route from the time he was like 9 or 10 years old. Or how about an adventure? What was the last adventure you took? Or a vacation? The idea is being very brief. And I'm going to go ahead and show you an idea. So it's not about getting every cell complete. It's just about filling in different cells because this is jogging your mind. This is helping you excavate and mine those gems from your past. Again, we're all storytellers, whether you believe it or not. You're going to think of things you haven't thought of in years, maybe months, maybe it was happened today, right? So that's what you're doing with this activity. And again, it's just about doing this, there's no perfect way to do this. You can write one word, a short phrase, a longer piece of text. And I'll be sharing these handouts as well so that you can follow along. For those of you, if you're viewing online and you want my assistant Lena to send it to you, she can put a link in the chat. I don't know if she already did. She did already. Fantastic. But again, the idea is to just try and find those story ideas. If my live audience, yes, Corinne.
Is the idea to write down the first thing that comes to your mind, kind of like stream of thought, or is the idea to kind of make it accurate?
There is no right or wrong way to do this. This is really about just trying to jog your memory. And this is just one technique. All we're trying to do is gather as many story ideas, because the notion is not every story idea is necessarily going to make for a great story. But we don't want to be limited. My brother said, yeah, it's kind of like, if you're an artist, a musical artist, you go into the studio, you're probably going to record more songs for an album than get on the album, right? Not every song you write, and Corinne, I know you're a musician, not every song you write is going to be, #1 hit, right? So it's about getting as many story ideas as you can. How's it coming along here?
A tenth of the way done.
Right, and again, like in your own time, you can certainly fill out more ideas. What we're really looking for, though, is just getting you comfortable with identifying story ideas. So I encourage all of you, do the homework for life. Do the first, last, best, worst, or just anytime you have a story idea that comes to mind, write it down on your phone. Use a little notepad. Or if you're old school, analog, pen and paper, pencil and paper, voice memos, whatever works for you, whatever floats your boat. I'm not here to tell you how to do this other than encourage you to really find those story ideas. I'm going to hide my answers. I'm going to hide my answers from the attendees here live in the studio, live in the classroom. And you can literally use any word. I just picked these words. Actually, these came from ChatGPT. I'm like, ChatGPT, help me out. What are some good words? And in fact, that's another great strategy. Use artificial intelligence to help it jog your memory. How are people feeling? Are people feeling good? Like we have some stories we might want to use? I'm just looking at the time. It's only an hour. We only have an hour today. This is Storytelling 101. We're not doing a deep dive on every last aspect. And again, you don't have to pick a story that was the best. It could be the worst thing. It could be a loss, a failure, a lack of triumph, right? It's not about being perfect. It's just about sharing a story that had meaning and impact for you. So let's go ahead. I think just in the sake of time, let's move on to our next slide here, which is the C number 2. And keeping with this mining for gems metaphor, we're now doing the sorting. We've unearthed all these beautiful gems, all these great story ideas. Now we need to choose the best one for our activity today. And as you can see in this little clip art, many different story ideas, many gems, and this person's picking what looks like some kind of, was that magenta? I don't even know. But the idea, you're picking the best story idea. But how do you know which story idea is best? Well, don't fret, we've got a story choosing checklist, right? We want to look for certain attributes about these story ideas that are going to help us make an informed decision and pick the best story. So number 1, any story worth sharing has to have stakes. There has to be conflict. If I just say, I got up, I brushed my teeth, I got dressed, went to work, had a coffee, came home, watched TV, went to bed, it's not a story. It's a sequence of events. That's why when you watch the news, it's not really a story. It's just a sequence of events. There's no compelling thing, really. Next, you want to have an aha moment. And before I get into that, well, no, let's get into that. So the aha moment is something that you experienced that made you go, oh, wow. An aha moment, a 5-second moment, a moment of realization, something that you learned, like my story of the 2nd grade bingo. My aha moment was, I'm an introvert. So think of your story. What aha moment did you have? Let me share a quick anecdote. I belong to Toastmasters, a public speaking group, and one of the participants gave a speech, told a story about how he likes to mountain bike. And his story was called, I Hate Him. And he told the story of competing with a mountain biker who he lost to 4 consecutive times. And he was complaining about how this guy was a better athlete and went on, and it was a funny and entertaining story, but it kind of ended abruptly. He never shared what he learned from the experience. So my evaluation to him, I said, hey, buddy, that's a funny story, but it lacked a lesson. It lacked a purpose. So when you're sharing a story, you have to think about your audience. Is it relatable? When you're telling stories, I won the lotto, I won $100 million, I bought a yacht and a mansion, I lived happily ever after. Nobody cares. We want to tell stories of struggle, of triumph, of failure, and then success. Maybe you didn't get the girl or the guy. Maybe you didn't get asked to prom. But how did that impact you? That's the relatability. Using these universal themes will really help you understand about the relatability. And then the emotions. We're not here to be on this one plane. We want to go on a roller coaster. We're not here just riding in Denver, the light rail, from destination A to destination B. We're taking a roller coaster. You want to take your audience on the highs and lows of what you're experiencing. So as you're looking at your story ideas, go through this checklist. Is this going to help you identify a better story? Is this helping you guys maybe identify a better story?
Sure.
Awesome. So next, we're going to move into the next stage, the story idea crafting. And the story idea crafting, keeping with our gem metaphor, this is where we're going to be doing some gem cutting. We can't include everything in the story that we want. And this takes practice. One of the things that's important to know about storytelling is You can't learn storytelling by observation alone. Yes, you want to listen for stories, watch stories to learn, but if you're not practicing and crafting your own stories, it's all for naught. I like to think of the example, I like to watch the TV show Chopped. You guys know the TV show Chopped? Mm-hmm. I've watched dozens, hundreds of episodes of Chopped. Has that made me a better cook? Not really. It's helped me become a more educated consumer about some of these really obscure and strange items you might want to put into your repertoire of ingredients. But the only way you're going to become a better cook is by cooking. But in order to cook well, you have to have a recipe. You have to sort of know what you're doing. That's the idea of a framework. When you're structuring your story, you want to use what we call a story arc. There's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this, I don't want to overcomplicate this. This is not like rocket science, right? Beginning, middle, end. What does that mean? Story starts somewhere. Who's in it? Well, you're in it because it's a personal story. We're not sharing somebody else's story. And again, the reason why it doesn't have the same impact. You're sharing your own story. So, it's like the who, what, where, when, why. But you're telling it in the order. Beginning, middle, end. We talked about the stakes. There's got to be some kind of conflict. Right? You're going along through your day when suddenly, I don't know, a bird pooped on you. Somebody walks out in front of you. I remember in high school, I was skiing with my girlfriend and a deer stepped out in front of our truck and she was driving and we had to slam on our brakes and luckily we didn't hit this deer. But both of our hearts, whew, that was intense, right? That was some conflict in that story. And then you want to have the aha moment. As a suggestion, you want to use the aha moment as close to the end as possible. Okay? And the reason for that is that aha moment is what lends itself to the lesson of the takeaway. If you share it too early in your story, then it makes the rest of the story sort of not important. Another suggestion I'll give you is that whatever aha moment you have, the beginning can be the opposite of the aha moment. So in my second grade bingo story, the aha moment was realizing that I was an introvert, that I was shy, I had social anxiety as a 7-year-old. The opposite of that was not knowing. And so it happened on the day of bingo. So that's why I started the story with bingo. So that's a little, and again, we don't want to have too much in our story. So as we're cutting this gem, we're taking out the details. So for our audience members today, how is the story idea, collecting, choosing, and now crafting coming along?
Good.
Good?
I'm noticing just very interesting small details from my life that I haven't thought about in a long time.
And that's the idea. Some of the best stories have been long forgotten. And so it's not about feeling like you need to have the perfect story, but it's something that's meaningful to you. And again, when you're telling a story that is this crazy thing, going back to the relatability, if you're telling a story about some crazy accident that you almost got killed in, but that was it, there was no real lesson learned, I would call that a romp. And in fact, that's what Matthew Dix calls it in Storyworthy. A romp is you're out with your drinking buddies, or you're out with your buddies at a party, or just at work, and you're just having fun at the water cooler talking about your crazy weekend. There's a time and a place for every kind of story. But if you truly want to connect, you want to have that aha moment, and you want to have that lesson takeaway. So I want to give the participants time. I know it takes time to develop a story idea. Are there any questions? I know I'm going a little bit quickly maybe. So are there any questions about any of the steps so far, whether it's the story collecting, the story choosing, or now the story crafting, right? This cutting the gem. Any questions so far?
No, makes sense.
Okay.
I really like how your outline kind of really helps us narrow the focus, so we're not kind of getting too much in the weeds. It's really focusing on the meat of the story.
That's a great point.
Right.
So like, as an example, you know, if I'm saying I'm in my second grade classroom, I don't need to describe the classroom. You want your audience to fill in the picture, right? You've all been in second grade at one point in your lives. You could think back to your elementary school days, right? And so you're filling in the holes, not the holes, but filling in the details in your own mind. And that's what it is. When storytelling, you're allowing your audience to be along for the ride. They're kind of your co-pilot, if you will. In fact, our brains are hardwired for storytelling. They've done like scientific studies that when the storyteller is sharing a story, the audience members, they've like hook up these like, you know, what are they, the different paths for the brain waves, and the brain waves start to be identical. When the storyteller is sharing a story, the audience members are also totally engrossed in the story, especially those well-told stories. When you have an idea that you're developing, so for those watching online, feel free to chat in. I would love to know what questions you have. Am I moving too quickly? This is my first hybrid event, so it definitely has led to some tension of making sure that we're connected here live online, as well as having things set up here in the classroom here at Denver Community Media. But please feel free to chat any questions you have. If I've gone too quickly, if I haven't explained things well enough. But also, again, I want to demystify this notion of storytelling. This is not something that is super complicated to understand. We all know stories. We read books, we watch movies, we listen to songs and listen to music that all have stories. And so the idea, again, is to just put down your ideas. And also, once you tell a story, you can always tell it more times. We'll get into that here in just a minute. But for my studio audience, do you have a story idea that's developing?
Yes.
Yes? Ready to come up and share in a minute?
No.
Live for the YouTube and the social media and the whole entire world?
Something about storytelling and practice? Is that related?
Absolutely, and we're going to get there in just a minute. But what I really want to highlight is that storytelling can be so much fun. I mean, it really can be. And it's not something you have to do with a live studio audience. You don't need to be on stage. But whether it's at work, at lunch, with your colleagues. And this is coming from an introvert, somebody who's very accustomed to just being a fly on the wall and listening. I now feel much more empowered and confident to engage in conversation. You know, I told a story once in one of my Toastmasters speeches when I moved to New York, and I had gotten into a conversation with a taxi driver. He was this Haitian taxi driver, and being able to learn about his experience of coming to New York from Haiti and driving a yellow cab, and just the challenges he had of adapting to life in the US and having to learn English, right? So, you know, when you share stories, you can connect with people. And I shared how I had moved to New York and I was, you know, getting adapted to life in the city. You can connect with people on a much deeper level. And, you know, one of the things I do as a coach is I coach people on how to interview better. And the number one thing I ask my clients is, how's your storytelling? When you get that question, those experiential questions, those behavioral questions, tell me about a time when you faced a challenge. How did it go? What was the outcome? Right? We're using a framework. I do a different framework for that kind of question, but you're telling stories. And so even if you don't think personal stories are that important, I want to challenge you on that, but you can also develop your stories for work. And in fact, this is like storytelling 101. We could spend an hour on each of these topics. How's everybody doing today? Good? All right. So our next step and last step is the story conveying, the story sharing. And again, this is like oral and verbal storytelling. So this is an opportunity to practice so that you can perfect your story. And that's why when you're sharing your story, before you share, you want to practice and rehearse. Practice and rehearse. What do I mean by that? Practice, you can literally record yourself with your smartphone. And in fact, I would encourage you to do so. Both the audio, just so you can listen to it multiple times until you get it right. And then with video, you can even watch yourself sharing the story. One of my clients recently shared that she doesn't like to listen to her voice. I hate listening to myself. Oh, do I really sound like that? And one of the things you can do today is you can now use AI. You can use artificial intelligence. You can transcribe your story, feed it into ChatGPT, and get feedback and chat with ChatGPT. ChatGPT, how's my story? Is it good? Is it compelling? Here's the checklist. Also, for those of you not using the voice chat with ChatGPT or any of the chat bots, it's an incredible experience. An incredible experience. Have any of you seen the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson? That movie was in 2013. I only saw it for the first time this year, and I was amazed at how accurate it like predicted the future. This gentleman, Joaquin Phoenix, I forget his character's name, he in essence falls in love with his computer because she's able to converse with him. And I'm not saying you need to fall in love with ChatGPT, but it's amazing what you can do by practicing with ChatGPT. You want to be conversational too. The one thing you don't ever want to do is to make your audience feel stupid because you're trying to use words to impress them. The last thing you want to do is do that. You want to make it conversational. You want to use dialogue, right? My boss told me I was fired, or my girlfriend said we're done, right? Using that conversational language is very, very impactful. So incorporate that as much as you can. And then, of course, pacing and pausing. The one thing that's really important to keep in mind with oral storytelling is that your audience doesn't have a pause button. There is no rewind. Oh, what did he say? There's no closed captioning. So by going at a pace that people can follow along and pausing those pivotal moments is really, really key. So that's why you want to practice and rehearse so that you can do a good job. The other thing too that I kind of maybe failed to mention, when you're telling stories to your family and friends, they're a lot more forgiving. They're going to interrupt you, ask you questions, etc. But when you're sharing a story at work during a presentation, they're not going to necessarily interrupt you. And so you want to make sure you're clear in your practice and rehearsal by pacing yourself and pausing. Any questions so far? We're moving right along. This is my first time doing a hybrid event. So it's like, are people online getting any questions online at all? Not yet? Don't be scared. I would love questions. Any questions from the studio audience?
I have a question.
Yes, Matt.
Time-wise, do you have any suggestions for like how people make sure that they don't run over or that they don't go too long or too short?
Great question. The question's about time. How long should your stories be? I mean, it does depend, but I think shooting for 5 minutes is a really good time length because if you're speaking to people that you don't know, their patience is a lot less than your family and friends. And it really allows for a well-developed story. So by, again, practicing, rehearsing, you will then be able to get that story down in time. The other thing that I didn't include here is you don't want to memorize your story word for word. Because if you do, it can be very robotic. It can feel very sort of just unnatural, unauthentic. And so that's why by being conversational, you don't have to worry about memorizing every single thing. And the great thing about stories is that you know the story. You know what happened. So it's less memorization. It's more just about probably what do I include in my story? You're very often having to remove things that are just not that important. Okay, moving right along. So now we have some more story time. This is my second story I want to share with you. And I realized I wasn't actually going through my Google Docs with you on this. So I chose as my story idea, my adventure, my best adventure ever was in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And this had a very impactful experience on me as a young person. And so I'm going to go through the documents now to really highlight before I get into the story. So the story idea checklist, right? Again, stakes, conflict, or problem. Does my story contain something that can be won or lost? If not, it's not going to be a winning story.
Preach.
Did you have an aha moment? If you didn't, it's a romp. It's something you share with your buddies. I got in this crazy accident. It was crazy. It was wild, man. Wow. Cool, man. Good on you. What did I realize? What did I learn? How did I transform from this experience? And in fact, this happens in your mind. And it might not even happen in the moment of your story during the experience. It might actually happen when you're writing and crafting the story later. And that's why you go through this process, so that you're better able to identify an aha moment. And that's why all story ideas are not great stories unless you can find these elements. Again, the relatability. Now I'm gonna go down these just quickly to then get into my story. Relatability means that this is something that people listening to the story can relate to. Okay, maybe people have never moved to Brazil, but have they ever traveled abroad, or have they ever had an experience speaking with somebody from a different country? These universal themes can be very helpful for you to identify stories and make sure they're relatable. Love, loss, growth, survival, fear, courage, etc. Another way to find great story ideas. And then you want that emotional roller coaster, the highs and lows, the pain and suffering, the pain, the joy and the pain and joy, the failures and the successes. So I'm going to go through my story that I'm calling Hey Mister. Does my story, this is from my best adventure ever in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Does my story contain something that can be won or lost? Well, it does, because I left the job for the great unknown. In the story, a boy approaches me asking a light for a cigarette. So there was conflict. Did I give him a light or not? Did I realize something in my story? Yes. And I don't want to ruin the story by going through every last thing. But this is what you're doing as before you craft your story, you're going through and just checklisting. Do my stories contain these elements? If they don't, that's okay. Keep searching and try to find these elements, or go back to your story bank, your story vault, and choose a different story idea. And then again, when you're crafting your story, you're putting it into the story arc, the beginning, middle, and an end. So you want to have a starting point. You're taking your audience on some kind of journey. You're on an airplane, you fly somewhere, and you land somewhere else, right? You're taking your audience on a journey. In my story, I was unfulfilled at work. I moved to Brazil, become a beach bum. I have this interaction with this child. And then again, with the story conveying, the practice. So I'm going to share my story now, but I've rehearsed this multiple times because I want to show you that, by doing so, you'll be able to tell a story that has impact. Any questions so far? Ready for the story? I've hyped it up. Okay. I'm sitting at work on my computer, working as a web developer, HTML coder, many moons ago, when it was still very manual. This is well before the high-tech solutions we have today. And it was a cool gig. I worked at a startup in Boulder, a bunch of young kids. We'd have, a lot of fun at work, went to happy hour together, partied together, great time. But I was unfulfilled. The work just didn't have meaning for me. And I had been to Brazil for spring break of my senior year of college and had a great time. Made some friends, some contacts, had fun. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? I'm moving to Brazil. And that's what I did. I moved to Brazil, to Rio de Janeiro, rented a studio apartment a block from the beach. It was only $400. That same apartment today probably rents for 10 times that. It was a wonderful time in my life. I was a beach bum by day, a party animal by night, having a great time. But I had this existential crisis. I can't just live in Brazil forever. I'm on a tourist visa. I'm searching for more meaning. I don't want to be a web developer. I don't want to be stuck behind a computer all day. What am I going to do? Well, luckily for me, I had a buddy comes up to me and he says, hey, Rico, would you want to teach English to my grandmother's doctor? Sure thing, man, let's do it. So I go to this doctor, he's paying me 20 bucks an hour, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but back then, for extra spending cash, this is incredible. It was like 2 or 3 times a week. It was like 250 bucks a month. That was my party fund. So it was amazing. I had no idea what I was doing. Got into conversation with him, asked him about his life. He asked me about mine. I'm learning Portuguese. I might have learned more Portuguese from him than I did English. But each time I leave my apartment, I take a bus to go visit him. And I see these street kids living on the streets. And it was just so impactful to see these kids sleeping on the street in the daylight. They sleep during the day because they're up all night, because they don't want to be attacked or hurt. They run around in these little gangs, and they're being hassled by people all the time. The store owners are telling them to scram, to shoo away. They're begging for food, for money. I give them change from time to time. I would buy them lunch from time to time. There's only so much I could do. And then one day, out of the corner of my eye, I see this 8-year-old boy, couldn't be more than chest high, wearing nothing but swim trunks. No sandals, no flip-flops, no shirts. And he's got a cigarette in his hand. And he says, hey, mister, can I get a light for my cigarette? It was like a gut punch. What do you do? This kid just wants to get a hit of nicotine to curb those hunger pangs. And here I am, this gringo, living in tropical paradise with this existential crisis. Privilege. Talk about privilege to be in that experience. So I fished in my pocket, handed him a few Brazilian reals, a couple of bucks, and wished him well. I said, I'm not going to give you a light. I can't contribute to that. Best of luck. As I get on the bus, I make my way to my seat, and I view out the window this boy being hassled, told to scram. The other passengers wanted nothing to do with him. And I sat down, and I just thought to myself, nobody's going to help this boy. There's nothing more I can do. I might never see this kid again. But that's when I knew that when I returned to the States, I was going to be an agent of change. So I moved to New York, and I became a New York City teaching fellow to make a change. Story. Thank you. That when you share these powerful moments, you can truly connect with people on a much deeper level. And you don't need to worry about having these amazing stories, because in fact, the most relatable stories are the better stories. It's not that I'm in Brazil that makes that story impactful for me. It's seeing a poor kid living on the street begging for money for just change to be able to eat something, right? So as you go through your story bank, you're looking for those relatable moments that had a meaning for you. Because the one thing I've learned as a public speaking coach and a storytelling coach, nobody wants to be told what to do. So when you're giving a speech, here are 3 things I think you should do to be happier and more well-adjusted in life. It falls flat. Rather, here are the 3 things that I learned that impacted me, that have transformed my life, is the way that I would recommend giving a speech. How are we doing on time? Okay. So what I want to share with everybody are some resources because, again, this is 1 hour. This is Storytelling 101. But in order to become a better storyteller, it definitely helps to watch people tell stories. And I don't know of any better source than The Moth. The Moth is a storytelling organization that has a show on NPR called The Moth Radio Hour. People just get up on stage and tell stories. And they have these story slams. So if you've ever been to a slam poetry event, it's an event where they have a competition for poems, for spoken word poetry. Similar concept, different form, the same format, different in that the content are stories versus slam poems, slam poetry. I highly recommend it. And in fact, in one of my resources, I've got a couple of links to my favorite stories on The Moth that I'll gladly share this presentation with anybody. And Matthew Dix, he is the most winning champion of The Moth. He's won the story slams like 60 times, the Grand Slam, which is like the annual championship, multiple times. Much of what I've learned about storytelling comes from this book. So if I could recommend only one book, this would be the book, without a doubt. This would absolutely be the book. And also, I want to share, oh, yes, another book is How to Tell a Story by The Moth. So The Moth has a collection of books, one of which is called How to Tell a Story. Fantastic. And I recommend the audio version, the Audible or the audio book, because the stories that are shared in the book on the audio version are the clips from the stories told on the Moth stage. So it's a really, really incredible experience. And they go deep on the art, science, and craft of storytelling. And then again, the story slams, these are events that are held all around the United States, I believe in the UK and even other countries. I don't know all the countries, but there's one here in Denver. It happens once a month at Swallow Hill Music, South Denver, and it's always the 3rd Friday of the month. So check online for story slams. They also have events called the Main Stage, where they have well-known storytellers come in, and it's not a competition, it's just to really have these amazing stories be told. And then the last thing I want to share with you is The Moth has a game of storytelling. And so this is a game that's a deck of cards. And this is very affordable. It's like less than $20. And on one side, you have themes. So I'm just gonna kind of go through a couple here quickly.
You need a volunteer.
Okay, absolutely. Revolution, risk, rivals, roads. You can start to see how this is gonna pique your interest and jog your memory. Rules, scandal, spooky. How about spooky? This is right in time for Halloween, Halloween season, timely. So it says, prepare a story about the moments that made your heart race or sent you hiding under the covers. Zombies, spiders, or your neighbor with that weird rake. From a pit in your stomach to outright terror. Shaking in your boots or confronting it head on. Reveal what makes you uneasy. Tell us about a time when... A time you were afraid of the dark. A time your heart skipped a beat. A time when your past came back to haunt you. Right? So these are story idea generators So you can play games. You can, there's instructions on how you can play a game with it. I like it just for coming up with story ideas for myself. So with the few minutes that are remaining, I just want to know, are there any questions about anything I've covered today? Any burning questions, anything that wasn't clear, anything you want me to reiterate?
Question.
Yes.
So the story you just told in Rear Vision Arrow.
Hey, mister?
Hey,
Yes.
mister. When you first started rehearsing it, how long did it take you? How much time did you shave off? How did you really pare it down to be as concise as it was when you told it to us just now?
Great question. Yeah. So the question is, how long did it take me to kind of prepare it, and how did I pare it down to get within the 5-minute time frame?
And how long was it when you first told the story, if you remember?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to think about, in that I first wrote a poem about this experience. But when I wanted to craft it into a story, I just had a kind of a stream of consciousness and just wrote it out. And then as you're writing it out, you're realizing, okay, there's a lot of detail that nobody cares about. There's just certain elements. I'm like, okay, nobody cares about the weather. Didn't play a part in this, right? Brazil weather, tropical paradise, not important. But I would say I probably wrote the story out in about 30 minutes, just, stream of consciousness. And then I went through it, and I timed myself. So I would just read the story with a stopwatch on my phone, voice memos on my iPhone. And I would listen to it, and then just like, what sounds strange, or what kind of wording doesn't sound, what doesn't flow? Is it conversational? If it wasn't conversational, I would change it. And then once I started recording it, within 3 or 4 takes, you start getting down to the most essential piece. And so now I can tell it pretty easily, because I know the story in my mind. I'm thinking my story arc, the stakes, does it have an aha moment, of course? Is it relatable? Does it have that emotional up and down? And again, there's no perfect story. But for me, the message was that I needed to make a difference in the lives of young people.
And your imagery of the boy was, you may not have been talking about the weather, but your description of him and the state that he was in with no shoes was very impactful. I feel it was very valuable to the story. So,
well, thank you. So I mentioned earlier that you don't want to include too many details, but you do want to be specific about certain aspects, right? Because I wanted to paint the picture of just how destitute this poor kid truly was. And I said, if he's just an 8-year-old boy, well, where are his parents? But knowing he's an orphan or the street urchin living on the streets, it really paints that picture, right? So when you're going through your stories, be looking at the details you're sharing. Are you sharing too much detail for things that don't matter? And that's, again, it's the gem cutting. You're cutting out the extra things you don't need. I've heard this expression, kill your darlings, which means that things that don't really impact the story, right? So any questions at all, Lena, from the online audience? Is it?
We got 4 tuning in right now on YouTube.
Okay. No questions.
They're shy.
They're shy. Well, look, I'm glad this is being recorded. This has been an incredible experience for me to be able to do my first hybrid event. The degree of difficulty, I understand and appreciate much more now. Any other questions, though? Yes.
I have a question about word choice. You like tried something out, recorded it, and then you like swap out the words, and kind of how does word choice play into like a quality story?
Yeah, that's a really good question around, what is the best word choice? And I like using a thesaurus, definitely, so that when you're listening to a word, you're like, is this something that I would say in my everyday conversation? I think that's a really good sort of like rule of thumb. Is this something that I say, or is it something that I don't say? I think there's a very different experience of writing a short story versus telling a story. And so by keeping the language simple, believe it or not, it's more impactful. When you make your audience feel stupid, you're disconnecting from them. You want to make it as simple as possible. And there might be words that you need to explain in your story, but I would say with the word choice, I would err on the side of more simple words versus more sophisticated words, for sure.
So don't be superfluous.
Yeah, don't be don't be superfluous, don't be like overly academic, and it depends on the audience though too, for sure.
Yeah.
But you're writing your story, you spent half an hour writing it out, and then you're kind of making sure that you hit all of these elements on the checklist, right? You're defining the most important pieces or what can be cut and all of those sorts of things. And then you're taking that and you're rehearsing it. And so are you really thinking about word choice? Are you really concerned with that? Or are you just concerned with, how the story is developed and making sure that you are giving those examples and that why and why people and defining your audience and that sort of thing. So it's like, rather than memorizing it, you said you're telling it with authenticity, right? So do you select certain words that you want to make sure that like in your outline when you're just kind of talking and speaking about your story, like do you hit certain words or do you?
Yeah, I'm going to be completely transparent. I don't think there's a perfect way to go about it. I think you just get better as you build your story bank and you start telling stories. But I can't highlight enough how great ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Claude, other AI tools can be, because what it can do is you can give it like a phrase and say, okay, like this phrase sounds a little bit overly sophisticated. How can I don't want to say dumb it down, but how can I make this more conversational? And for anybody who I think is afraid of using AI, I'm not using AI to write my stories. I'm using AI as like my editor. Like, hey, how can I improve this? Is there anything that I'm not seeing? Identify my blind spots. That's what I'm doing. So I would highlight AI in that sense, very much so. Okay, so I think we're just about out of time. The last slide I wanted to leave up here is for people who want to learn more. Let's connect. I would love to speak with you. If you want more information, I can send you the presentation, of course, and the supporting documents, the activities. And I just really want to impress upon all of you just how amazing storytelling can be. Again, it's our superpower as animals in the animal kingdom. We're the only animals that share stories. And like anything you do in life, the more you do it, the better it gets. And I just truly think it's really, really important that you practice this. Practice makes perfect. Share stories with your friends. You don't need to do a workshop on storytelling. You don't need to get on stage at the Moth, but just record it. You don't even need to share it on social media. But by sharing stories, I guarantee your confidence will grow, you'll become more persuasive, and you'll certainly connect much more deeply. But I want to thank you, everybody, for coming today. Thank you for the online attendance. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.